You've
All right.
been here before.
All right. Okay, you guys, let me know if I have any technical issues or anything, but we'll just get going. So, today's presentation is choosing the right plants for heat or heat resilient gardening. How we're going to thrive through California's hot summers, which we were just talking. We kind of been lucky so far this year. So everybody knock on wood as I do this presentation. I hope I don't jinx it. My name is Janey Santos. I graduated Yolo County, I think it was 2023. Jennifer, if you remember, I don't remember.
Sounds about right.
Um, yeah, about that time. So yeah, love it. And I'm a big gardener, and you all will see I'm a big ornamental gardener. I like flowers and plants, shrubs, perennials, all that kind of stuff. So this presentation is going to be focused a lot on ornamental gardening, you'll see. So today I will talk about our Zone 9B climate and the characteristics that we have here in Northern California, the importance of heat resilient gardening here. We are hot and we are dry. And if we try and garden like they do in the East Coast or even in the South where it's hot and humid, we're going to run into issues in our garden for sure. We're going to talk about recognizing signs of heat stress on your plants, especially as it starts to heat up. There are signs that we can see, and we can see if things are becoming issues and if there's something that we can do to help that. And then one of the things that I find super, super interesting, which is plant adaptations to heat. There are certain plants that we know that we call heat tolerant or drought tolerant. And there's a reason why they're heat tolerant and they're drought tolerant. And it's the adaptations the plants have taken as they've developed and grown and become what they are to be able to handle the heat and the dry climate that we live in. We'll also talk about soil and microclimate considerations in the heat, what things that you can do for your soil, what things that you can do for microclimates in your own garden, from one side of your house to the other side of your house, one side of a fence to the other side of the fence, even one side of a plant to the other side of a plant can make a huge difference in how a plant can tolerate our summers here in California. I'll give some examples, and these examples are right out of my garden, and so I can tell you that they work for the heat here, at least in Yolo County. And then also some maintenance tips for when we do get into the hot part of the year. You know, July is our hottest month, and I mean that's our average hottest month. And so it'll be a good reminder to all of you for different things that we can do and different adaptations if you want to be a lazy gardener like I sometimes am. Maybe, you know, you don't want to put up the shade cloth for the plant. Maybe you just want to get plants that can handle the heat and you don't have to worry about it during the hottest part of our year. And then we'll finish up with question and answer. And like I said, feel free to interrupt me or leave chats and leave something in the chat if you have a question. I'm happy to answer. All right, if you guys hear my dog in the background, I'm sorry. His name is Monty Don, so he's appropriate to be on on this presentation. All right, so let's talk about Zone 9B, California. So no, hold on. There we go. Zone 9B, California. So I specify Zone 9B, California, because the USDA zones really only take into account the temperature minimums. They don't take into account humidity. They don't take into account wind. They don't take into account the strength of the sun. And so whenever I talk about zones, I like to specify where I am in that particular zone, because Zone 9B in California, where we are, is exactly the same as Zone 9B in Tampa, Florida. And we all know that Tampa, Florida is very different than Davis, California, where I live, right? So just going over the climate characteristics that we have to think about when we're gardening here, we have really mild winters, right? We have cooler winters. Our winters definitely cool down, but not so much that we're dealing with a lot of freezes. We do have some frosts. We get a lot of rain in the winter. So we have to be able to understand that our plants are going to get a lot of moisture during the winter time and almost zero moisture during the summertime. We have long, hot, dry summers up to the triple digits. We all know this. And we have to have plants that can handle those long, hot, dry summers. we have incredibly low humidity. And I think that this is really important because a lot of times you can see a plant will be recommended for heat. Oh, this is a really good plant for heat. This is a really good plant for zone 9, but it might be a really good plant for zone 9 in Tampa, Florida, like I was saying. It might do a lot better with a little bit more humidity in the air. And if you try and plant it here, it's going to crisp up and it's going to die with our arid climate. So that's something to think about where we live. Like I said, we have little to no summer rainfall. If you have a garden, it's pretty much a necessity that you have to have some type of watering system, drip irrigation, micro sprinklers, um, you know, being really on top of hand watering, which I am very impressed if you can hand water around here, but really making sure that we supplement our gardens with water because we get none of that summer rainfall that other areas of the country will get, even if they do get as hot as we do. We don't get any of that rainfall. We also deal with hot, dry winds, and this is where microclimates come into play. And this is where I really like the sunset zones, because sunset zones take into account dry winds, they take into account the humidity levels, they take into account the sun strength and all that kind of stuff. So thinking about the hot, dry winds that we have, even if you live in Davis versus Woodland, the difference in the winds and coming over the delta is going to make a difference in how your plants are going to be able to handle our heat waves and our really hot summers in here in California. So it's something to think about. The other thing to think about is we have an incredibly long growing season, right? Like our last frost is usually late February, early March, and we can go all the way to November. And our plants have to be able to handle that, right? So if it's kind of a short-lived plant that's going to peter out halfway through the season, do we really want to put that in our garden? Is it really worth it? So all of these considerations are things that you want to think about when you're planting a heat resilient garden, one that you want to look really good all season long. So what is heat resilient gardening? I know I put a lot of words on this slide. I just thought it was easiest just to put the definition up. Heat resilient gardening is the practice of designing, planting, and maintaining a garden in ways that help plants survive and thrive during periods of high heat and prolonged sun exposure, aka our California summers, right? It involves selecting appropriate plant species, modifying the environment to reduce heat stress, and implementing sustainable gardening techniques that conserve water and protect soil health. Basically, what it is it's paying attention to how your particular plants are going to be able to tolerate our heat. Are you selecting the right tomatoes? Are you selecting the right cucumbers? Are you selecting the right even hydrangeas that are going to be able to handle our heat, our long summers, our very, very strong sun, all that kind of stuff. And it's something that I like to think of as heat resilient gardening. And I think the more attention that you pay to this initially in your garden, the easier it's going to be to maintain a beautiful garden over the summertime. It's really easy to have a beautiful garden in the spring when our highs are in the high 70s or 80s. It's a lot harder this time of year and as we get into July and August when things start to get pretty stressful for these plants. So what is heat stress? Heat stress in plants occurs when temperatures exceed a plant's ability to maintain normal physiological functions, especially when it's combined with intense sunlight, dry conditions, insufficient water. It disrupts key processes like photosynthesis, respiration, transpiration, leading to a decline in plant health. So basically what it is the plant hits a certain temperature and it gets stressed out and it says, I can't handle this anymore. And there's variation on exactly what temperature that is. A lot of, some people say it's 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes some people say it's anything above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. No matter what it is, we're over that. We're over that temperature. We're at the temperature where all plants will experience some physiological signs of heat stress. And what really matters for us as gardeners is how that plant handles that heat stress. Will it be able to handle it, or is it going to drop all its blooms? Is it going to have flower or fruit abortion, right? Where in response to too hot and too intense conditions, it's going to drop all its flowers or it's going to drop all its fruit, and then you don't get any tomatoes or you don't get any beautiful blooms. Again, why would we plant a plant like that when we are consistently above 86 degrees, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And if that's going to be the adaptation, why would we have it? Some plants will even just completely shrivel up into itself. I noticed Brunnera, which is a landscaping plant that usually likes a little bit more shade. Brunnera I often will find will just about melt in our heat, and it'll just die back down to its root system. It'll come back over the winter and in the spring. But again, why would we want to plant a plant that is just going to die back for the majority of the season in response to heat? Other signs of heat stress in plants is wilting. This is something that's really important because the best time to water your plants is in the morning before the sun has really risen, so that you don't have any evaporation. And then if you go back to that plant that you watered in the morning in midday when it's hot, hot, hot and the sun's high overhead, you might see the leaves wilt and you might think, oh no, it needs more water. But actually, wilting is a sign of heat stress, and it might just be that the plant is just too hot. And it's an adaptation that that plant takes to protect itself, to decrease the transpiration and decrease the evaporation of the water, that precious water. And it might not need extra water. So waiting until the evening, once it cools down a little bit, to see if those wilted leaves pop back up is really important, just so that you actually don't overwater a plant, because that is something that can definitely happen with heat. People will see signs of wilting and will just water the heck out of that plant and then actually overwater and drown that plant. So recognizing signs of heat stress, that it's actually heat stress and it's not drought stress or lack of water or something like that. Now, if you see a plant have leaf scorch or leaf burn where it gets brown around the edges, that's a sign that your plant probably is suffering. It needs some type of intervention, whether it's more water or whether it's a shade cloth or an umbrella or something like that. Or maybe it might not be the right plant for you. That's something to think about. Leaf drop definitely happens as well. Curling or rolling of the leaves definitely happens. Sometimes I'll see this on my star jasmine as it gets really hot. And then, of course, stunted growth. Sometimes a plant just won't perform photosynthesis. It won't perform its duties because of the stress of the heat, and it just won't grow. And then, of course, when it's stunted, it's more susceptible to disease. It's just not the right plant in the right place. All right, so this is, like I said, what I'm super, super into and I find very, very interesting is different plant adaptations to heat. So as time goes on, evolution occurs. These plants have to survive in our environment or have to survive in Arizona or Southern California or, something, and they adapt. And I think it's really cool how plants will adapt to be able to handle certain conditions, whether it's the leaf size, how big the leaf is. Of course, the bigger the leaf, the more stoma, which are basically the little pores or holes that water evaporates from, and it's all connected. And as the water evaporates out of those pores, it pulls more water up from the root system. That's how a plant takes in water. So if you have more of those stoma, you're going to have more evaporation. If you have smaller leaves and less stoma, you're going to have less evaporation, and that plant is going to need less water, and it's going to be able to handle periods of less water. Same thing with the plant shape. Same thing with the orientation of the plant. Are they tilted downwards that they can kind of shade themselves? Are all the stoma located on the underside so it can shade itself? Really interesting. Pubescence, which is basically leaf hairs. There's a lot of plants that will actually have hairy leaves on it. And the purpose of the hairs is actually to shade those stoma, those holes, for again, to decrease the transpiration and decrease the evaporation of that precious water. Deep and extensive root systems is something that's pretty common. We all know a lot about. If you pull a weed and if you are really careful, you can pull the weed and the root system is absolutely crazy. And that's because that weed has adapted to being able to grow with little to no water. It's developed this crazy root system that can accept, reach out, seek out, and find all that beautiful water so that it can survive with no supplemental water, even in our hot, dry summers. And then also there's waxy or reflective coatings. Some plants like succulents, they will actually store water in their leaves and then they'll have a really waxy coating on it that will, again, keep that water where it wants it to be. A reflective coating will actually reflect off the sun's rays to make sure that It's not accepting too much of that sun, and it's not drying itself out, kind of like if you put sunscreen on your nose or something like that. So it's just pretty cool. Here's some examples. All these pictures I took today, so I apologize. I took them midday, so it's the bright hot sun. It's a beautiful sunny day. Here is Callilophus. Callilophus is a really interesting plant. It's also called Texas primrose. So obviously it can handle the Texas climate. It also does really well in our climate. Oh gosh, sorry guys. It also does really well in our climate. It's a beautiful yellow color, and it just keeps blooming and blooming and blooming all season long as it gets hot. But I want to bring your attention to the leaves. Look at the leaves. They're so narrow. They're so small. Instead of being broad, they're very thin and almost look like needles. And you can imagine the stoma, the little pores on those leaves. There's only a couple of them on each leaf because there's not a lot of surface area. So that's an adaptation that this plant has taken to be able to tolerate the conditions that it likes to grow in. And I just think that that's really cool. It's a beautiful plant, but because of this adaptation of these narrow leaves, it can handle Texas weather. It can handle our weather. It can handle Arizona weather. It's a really interesting and great plant. This is lantana. This is a pretty common one. I'm really mean and I call this plant a parking lot plant because developers will plant this in a parking lot because they know it can handle those heat islands of having that concrete and that cement. It can handle the hot weather and it can still keep blooming. I mean, go look at these at the South Nugget. There's beautiful examples of lantana in Davis, and they're doing perfectly fine, even though they're right next to a parking lot where I'm sure it's 15-20 degrees hotter than other places that don't have the parking lot right there. One of the adaptations that lantana has taken to be able to handle this heat is those stoma that I was talking about, those pores on the leaves where the water evaporates from. All of lantana's stoma is located on the underside of the leaf, underneath. So you can almost think of these leaves as little umbrellas, and the umbrellas are shading the stoma. So when it gets hot, instead of having the stomas, pointing up towards the sun where you would think it would evaporate very quickly, the stoma is all on the underside of the leaf, and it just slows down that evaporation, meaning this plant needs less water than other plants that have stoma oriented, facing upwards towards the sky. So I just thought that that was really cool. Here is Stachys byzantina, otherwise known as Helen von Stein lamb's ear, one of my favorite plants. I love this plant. If you guys don't grow this plant, go get it. It sells out pretty quickly at garden centers, but if you can get your hands on it, you won't be without it because it's really easy to divide. But the cool thing about this plant, just like other lamb's ear, it has those hairs. And not only are those hairs, it's a very soft leaf. It's soft to pet. That's why it's called lamb's ear or big ears. That's another name for this variety. The hairs actually shade it. It shades its stoma. It's at a real micro level, the shading of the hairs, but that's what they're there for. They're there to shade the stoma so that this plant doesn't use up as much water and it can handle the dry summers that we have here. And then let's talk about root systems, right? Plants will develop really intense root systems like yarrow right here. This is Achillea milfolium, or otherwise known as yarrow. I always just say yarrow. So yarrow is known for having a super extensive root system. It's one of the reasons why yarrow is really great to plant on a slope, because its root system will actually stabilize soil so you don't get any runoff of the soil. But that root system allows the yarrow to handle the hot, dry conditions that we have, because it's basically like that weed I was talking about. It has such a developed root system that it gets access to the water. It finds whatever water is in that soil and it sucks it up. I don't have a picture but Verbena bonariensis is a good example of a plant that absolutely has a fantastic taproot. A taproot is another example of a really extensive root system where the taproot will do a deep dive down into the ground so it can get all the water that hasn't evaporated from the hot, dry summer. So it's just really cool to see what this will do. And then, might I say, if you look at the leaves of the yarrow, it's kind of the same thing as the Calilophus, very small leaves with very limited stoma. These plants kind of do the same things just so that they can tolerate the heat and the dryness. And then here we have a begonia, a really beautiful begonia. I love begonia because a lot of them can handle the sun and can handle the shade, which is really cool. But one of the reasons why it can handle the sun is you can kind of see the reflection off the leaf. These leaves are shiny and they have a little bit of a waxy coating on them. And that not only keeps that moisture in the leaves, look at that stem, that's a real fleshy stem. And if you break it open, it's wet in there and it holds all that moisture. And it's just an adaptation that this plant takes to be able to handle our hot, dry summers. And then that shininess, that reflection, it's basically reflecting that sun to go somewhere else. It doesn't want it there. It doesn't want to absorb the sun. That's why a lot of plants will have dark leaves as well to reflect the sun and keep it cool and keep it surviving during the hot summers. So, going a little different direction, right? Talking about plants and the things that plants will do. There's also things that you can think about for the soil to make your garden a heat resilient garden or a garden that can handle our California hot summers. When you think about your soil, it's important to have healthy soil just so the plants can get the nutrients. You got a lot of life in there. You got bugs, all that kind of stuff. But it's also something to think about with water retention. If you have really bad soil that doesn't retain any water and the water just drains right through it and drains down either off and into the street and into the drainage systems or down through the water table and down into the water table, the plants aren't going to get the water that they need. So having soil that has good water retention is really, really important. It's also important to have really good drainage because we're watering so much. If you overwater, you can actually kill a plant with kindness during the summer, which is shocking, but it does happen, especially if you have a sprinkler system or something like that, and you're not really monitoring it. If you don't have good drainage and the water will just sit there, that's an issue that can hurt that plant as well, no matter what adaptations it has. Soil structure is so, so very important also for the root development. If you think about it, if you have super compacted clay soil that, a plant can only develop its root system a couple inches because it's so hard for those roots to get through. And that means that, think about that yarrow. That yarrow is not going to be able to develop its extensive root system. So it's not going to have access to all of that beautiful water that it can find. So having really good soil structure and making sure your soil is not too compacted is super important, not only for the plants, not only for just regular gardening, but for heat resilient gardening. We need those plants to develop its root system to get the nutrients, but also to get the water. And that's where the importance of organic matter comes in. Whenever anybody asks me, like, what do I do? I have too clay soil, or I have horrible drainage, or I have this, or I have that. Organic compost. Go to the Yolo County dump and get that beautiful compost that they have and put it in your garden. That compost is going to improve the water retention. It's going to improve the drainage. It's going to improve the soil structure. It's going to help with root development. And it's just going to make your garden tolerate our heat so much better. So what I do, which, it's up to you how you want to handle it. I will just top dress my garden with a couple inches of compost, and that compost will eventually work itself into the soil, and then that's going to allow the plants to develop their root systems. It's going to have good water retention, good drainage, and all that kind of stuff. So just you don't have to do anything other than top it, put a couple inches on it, and then put some mulch on it, which I'll talk about in a second. So in addition to soil considerations, think about your microclimates, right? All of our gardens, it doesn't matter how big your garden is, you have a microclimate, whether it's the north side of your home or underneath a big tree or understory planting. You have a big shrub and you're going to plant something underneath it. That gives that plant a little bit more shade. And so maybe that plant can handle it a little bit more. If you really want to plant a certain plant, or if you know a plant's struggling and you're seeing some leaf scorch, maybe moving it to a place like that is going to help. Something I always like to tell people is when you see a plant tag, from most of the time, the majority of the time, a plant tag on a plant is from a plant company that's nationwide. And that plant tag is for everybody, absolutely everybody. So if you see a plant tag, say you see a peony, and that peony says, oh, it needs full sun. Well, maybe that's for the North. Maybe that's for Michigan. Maybe that's for, Connecticut. That's not for us. For us, peonies, sometimes they can go in full sun, but the majority of the time they have to be protected from hot afternoon sun. But a plant tag's not always going to say that. So just because you read the plant tag, really consider our climate and your garden's climate, and then the microclimates that you have in your garden that's going to help that plant thrive. Another thing that you have to think about is the wind. We get hot, dry wind here. And there's other areas around here. My parents live up in Reading. They get intense, hot, dry wind. And this wind will dry out those plants in 2 seconds and cause them to scorch and cause them to burn and cause them to suffer and sometimes die. So understanding what direction the wind comes from, understanding how you can protect a plant from the hot, dry winds, especially a susceptible plant that maybe might not be able to adapt to the heat as well as other ones. It's something to think about and to consider in your garden. And then, like I was saying, mulch. Mulch is so incredibly important for us. I've heard a lot of people say that they use compost for mulch, not so much around here. But if you think about it, if you're using compost for mulch, you don't have too much surface area to protect that beautiful moisture from evaporation or to protect it from the hot winds that come here. So having something like arborist wood chips or even rocks or something like that, or walk on bark is really going to help your microclimates. It's really going to help your plants be able to tolerate the heat that we have here. I love using arborist wood chips because they're free, right? But whatever you have to have some type of mulching on top of your soil is going to keep your plants in cooler, keep the root system cooler, keep the water from evaporating more slowly. And it's also going to protect all those beautiful bugs and the beautiful life in your soil. So it's something that's really important that you want to think about. And I'm just reminding all of you this, that it's not just the plants that we're picking in our garden. It's the other things that we have to think about too, to make our garden be able to tolerate the heat that we have during the summers. All right, let's talk about some examples. Do we have any questions so far? Does anybody have any questions? Let me know if you guys have questions. So let's talk about heat tolerant plants. This is just a couple, right? Like just a couple of them. There are so many. And I just took my camera out and took a picture of some of them that I was appreciating today in my own garden. So this right here is a garden bed that I planted right along my dry creek bed. The spiky ones that you can see kind of in the middle. Can you guys see my clicker? Can you see my clicker? My mouse? You can. Okay.
Yes.
So right here, these plants right here, these are called mangave. And mangave are a cross between a manfreda and an agave, which is really cool because agaves are known to do really well in heat, right? But agaves grow really, really slowly, super slowly, right? Think of a century plant, right? It takes 100 years to grow. I mean, not really, but it takes a long time to grow. So this mix that they're doing now is a cross between a manfreda and an agave, and it makes these really, really beautiful specimens. You can see a couple more over here, right there, and they do really, really well. They do amazing. They can take the more water you give them, the faster they'll grow, but they can handle heat because they have these fleshy leaves, and some of them are reflective. The manfreda aspect to the mangave is what gives these plants these interesting colors. So you can see this one has some speckles on it, and that's the manfreda cross in it, which is really cool. This chartreuse green plant right here, this is Sedum mexicanum. It's a really, really beautiful plant, and it's an evergreen for us here in Zone 9B. It's a succulent. Angelina sedum is another name for it. This is another variety called lemon coral sedum. Really, really beautiful, and it can handle our heat like no problem. And I love planting it as kind of like a ground cover plant. I went and did a garden tour of another gardener who lived in I want to say Folsom is where she lived, maybe Citrus Heights. And she had this as her ground cover everywhere. And so she basically was using it as mulch. It was a living mulch. It was green mulch, is what it was. And it can handle our heat, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it's chartreuse green during the winter. What that means is that it can handle the wetness that we have too. And that's another thing about the mangave. They can handle our wet winters as well, which is really neat. Here, the yellow, you can see another example of the Cali lophus that I was talking about. And then this purple plant down here, or blue plant, this is called scaevola. And this plant is amazing. I was telling you guys about my parents who live in Redding, and they actually live on the top of a hill. So they get this hot, dry wind that goes up this hill. And one of the only plants that can survive without hot, dry wind is scaevola. It can just handle the heat. It's called fan flower because if you look really closely, all the petals are kind of whirled off to one side and kind of like a lady's fan, and it just can handle the heat absolutely no problem. And then in the back, I have more of that beautiful lantana, that parking lot plant that it is so mean of me to say, but it's the truth. It's amazing. It can handle the heat. And then in the back, we have a grass, which I cannot pronounce, but it's called little blue stem, the common name of it. And grasses are fantastic. They have really, really developed root systems. They have thin leaves, right, with thin stomas, and they're beautiful for our temperature. And then you can see in between all of my other plants, I have arborist wood chips, and it just makes a fabulous planting that is going to thrive even when we get up to the triple digits. Another plant that I absolutely love is Buddleia. Buddleia is a super cool plant that will keep blooming all season long. It can handle the heat. It has an incredibly intensive root system and a great taproot, which makes it be able to handle it no problem. This variety is called Miss Molly. It's a very common variety. It gets up to 5 feet tall, is what it says, but this guy is like 6.5 feet tall already. It's absolutely beautiful, and the butterflies, of course, love it. Now, if you live in Oregon or Washington, you got to be careful because it's invasive in those areas, and they actually don't allow some buddleias to grow, but or to be sold there. But we don't have that problem here. We can really enjoy those buddleias, and it's a great plant. Just off to the side of that, you can see one of my favorite heat tolerant plants, which is called Knifophia. Knifophia, or red hot poker, is a really beautiful plant. And I think it brings such a beautiful interest to the garden, to the hot climate garden. This one is called Hot and Cold Knifophia, and the hummingbirds love it, absolutely love it. So those are some good examples. This one you can see in the back, this is called Tacoma. And Tacoma reminds me of what is that vine called? Orange trumpet vine, right? Orange trumpet vine can get what, like 20 feet tall, 40 feet tall. I mean, it can go crazy. It can take over a garden very quickly. But Tacoma is more of uh, a smaller size that still has those beautiful tubular blooms, and it can handle the heat really well. It has really small leaves. It'll start blooming in the summer, and even with the triple digits, it'll keep blooming. Right in front of that, that beautiful purple plant, this is called Russian sage, or Perovskia atriplicafolia, right? And Russian sage has an amazing root system, and this is actually a plant that you don't want to overwater. If you overwater it, you can cause root rot, and you can actually have it start to flop on you if you overwater it. So that's a consideration that you have to think of if you're going to be planting plants like the Knifophia or like the Russian sage. You got to make sure that you're not giving it too much water. You got to make sure that you're planting your combinations equally so that you're not planting a hydrangea right next to a Russian sage, because that hydrangea is going to need so much water, more water than that Russian sage, and neither of them are going to be happy. So you can see I can have big, beautiful blooms in my garden, and this garden does not need a lot of water. It needs some water. It does need some drip irrigation, but it does not need a lot, which is great. This purple bluish plant is one of my absolute favorite plants. I think I wrote a poem, or I wrote an article on this plant for the Master Gardeners, the Yolo County Master Gardeners blog. And this one is called, well, you can see it, Salvia longis spicata, otherwise known as Mystic Spires Blue, or this one is called Plain the Blue Salvia. It has really dark glossy leaves, and it can handle the heat. And And the cool thing about this one is the calyxes, the things that hold the blooms, they're the same color as the blooms. So if it does get too hot or you're being lazy and you don't want to get out there and deadhead, as the blooms fall off of this plant, it's still going to look purple. It's still going to look like it's blooming. I haven't deadheaded this plant at all because I don't feel like I need to, because the calyxes still look just as gorgeous, really beautiful. And then right underneath that is a verbena, and verbena has hairy, that adaptation of really, really hairy leaves. It also has a really fibrous root system and can handle the heat. So it makes it really easy to have a beautiful garden when you're selecting plants like this. One of my favorite trees, which I know a lot of you probably have, is a crepe myrtle. Crepe myrtles, they can handle our heat and they bloom beautifully during the summer. And they're just a wonderful addition to a heat resilient garden. You can see the Russian sage underneath there. You can see more of my verbena. This one is called a heliotrope. It's actually a heliotrope. I think it's a heliotrope arborescens, and that can handle the heat too. That type of heliotrope is a heat tolerant plant. And then you can see I have some more mangave in the background. This is a new plant, it's a relatively new plant. It's a new introduction into the plant world. It is called a chitalpa, and it's a cross between a desert willow, which is a very common plant. They actually have it at the UC Davis Arboretum. I think it's in the butterfly garden, and a catalpa. And it's just this gorgeous plant that with the heat, it just grows faster and blooms more, and it just appreciates the heat so much. And can you imagine? I mean, can you believe that there's a heat tolerant, drought tolerant plant shrub that has as beautiful blooms as that? And it's something that can handle our heat with absolutely no problem and really doesn't need too much water. Again, I still put these plants on drip irrigation because I like blooms, and everything will bloom better if you have a little bit of water to it. But you have to make sure that you don't give it too much water. A lot of people say this plant, a chitalpa, smells really good as well. I unfortunately can't smell it. I'm one of those people that can't smell it, but other people just rave about how good this plant smells. So it's called a chitalpa. It's a new one. This is called El Nino. Very, very cool plant that can handle our heat with absolutely no problem. It will get up to about 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide. So it's basically a very large shrub or a small tree. Um, Gara. Gara is one of my new favorite flowers to have in my garden. It is so beautiful. It's otherwise known as a butterfly flower, and it is just one of the most beautiful, beautiful plants. It's actually a perennial for us, and it can handle the heat. Underneath here, this is called a petunia, or this is a hybrid of petunia, otherwise known as supertunia. Really beautiful. This plant does take a little bit more attention and care because it is susceptible to budworms, and cabbage moth worms. And so you do have to treat that and deal with that, but it's something that is really beautiful and again can handle the heat. In this pot over here, we have a little olive tree. Again, olive trees have super extensive root systems, like the heat, can't handle too much water. They're adapted to be able to handle our climate. And same with the iceberg rose, which is another example of one of those parking lot plants, but they're just so beautiful. You have to have them in your garden. And then purple fountain grass. We see purple fountain grass all the time around here, and it's just because it's one of those grasses that can handle the heat. Super, super extensive root system, strappy leaves, dark leaves. I mean, it basically just has all the beautiful adaptations that you would want to be able to handle our heat, which is really, really great. So I love having purple fountain grass. I actually will leave my purple fountain grass up all year, and then I won't cut it back until January. So I have some winter interest as well. And you can leave these seed heads on for the birds, for the pollinators, all that kind of stuff to nest in and everything. And it's just a great plant. This is a new one to me. This is the first I've heard of this plant. I just found it at the garden center, and I just think it's so cool. It's an Australian native, and there's actually pictures of this plant growing in the Western Australia, like with the red soil and everything like that. And this plant is just popping out of the ground, happy as can be. It's called a telotus, or otherwise known as a pink mulla mulla flower. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's really beautiful. It looks kind of like a celosia. area, maybe like a bottle brush or something like that. But it's a really, really beautiful plant. This variety is called Matilda, and she only gets 1 to 2 feet tall, 1 to 2 feet wide. But there's another variety called Joey that looks very similar to this. It is technically a perennial for us, but I think if we get really cold, I think it might succumb. But if you can see the leaves down here, they're very fleshy, very succulent-y, and so I can see why this plant can handle itself in the Australian outback. And then, of course, behind that, we have Shasta daisies, which is another great example. Don't look too close because I got a deadhead mine, but it's another great example of a plant that can handle our heat, can handle our dryness, and will continue blooming. All right, so let's talk about maintenance tips for the heat, because like I said, it's one thing to pick the right plants. It's one thing to be able to water them, but it's another thing to do things in the right way. And so it's really important just to remember these things. These are probably a review for you all. Again, water early. Watering early in the day is super, super important. If you water when it's hot, when it's sunny, when the wind has picked up, that water is going to evaporate and it's not going to have a chance to soak down into the soil where the root system is, which is where you want. So 4 a.m., 5 a.m., that's when you want to water. That's when you want to turn on your drip irrigation system. Stop fertilizing. Stop fertilizing when we get hot. Now, I say this with a big asterisk because heat is relative, right? There's the heat wave that's happening across the country now, and everybody's talking about, oh, it's 95 degrees, right? That's a different 95 degrees, of course, than our 95 degrees. But when we hit our heat waves, you want to stop fertilizing because you want to stop that plant from pushing out new growth. That's just going to cause it a lot of stress and cause heat scorch and make it susceptible to disease, and it could die. So stop fertilizing. However, if we're talking about plants that can normally handle the heat, if it's 90 degrees, 95 degrees, I wouldn't stop fertilizing for that. A rose is a different story. There's a big asterisk when I say stop fertilizing. But if we do get in what we here in California, Yolo County would consider a heat wave, obviously you want to stop fertilizing because you want to limit that growth. It's kind of like when we talk about roses. We stop fertilizing roses in June, July, August because we don't want any new growth on our roses. I talked about mulch, how important mulch is. You got to have some type of protection. Got to have some type of protection for that soil. If you don't have protection, all that beautiful water is going to dry out, and then those roots won't be able to develop the right way. You just got to do what you got to do. Put some mulch on. It's completely worth it. Provide shade. I think there are so many different ways to provide shade, whether it's like dragging over an umbrella, putting a shade cloth up. I think one of the coolest ways to provide shade, like for instance, tomatoes. A lot of times it gets too hot for us to grow tomatoes here, but if you've considered planting a really big sunflower on the west side of your tomatoes, right, where the hot afternoon sun is, if you plant, I learned this from Curious Flora Nursery, which used to be Annie's Annuals. If you plant the Delta sunflower, which is the sunflower that you see along the freeways, just growing basically as a weed, it's our native California sunflower. If you plant a Delta sunflower to the west of your tomatoes, it's automatically going to grow up and it's going to shade those tomatoes from the hot afternoon sun. And so you're going to keep your tomatoes at a beautiful temperature where it's going to maintain its blooms, it's going to maintain its fruit, and you're going to keep getting fruit even throughout the hot season. It's just going to prolong your fruiting season for tomatoes. So providing shade isn't always having shade cloth or umbrella or something like that. It's kind of just thinking what you're going to co-plant and where you're going to plant it in your garden, maybe next to a fence or something like that. So something to think about, providing shade for these plants that might suffer once we get into triple digits. Checking plants in the evening. I kind of talked about this with the wilting leaves. Don't check your plants in the middle of the day. You'll just be sad. You'll just cry because you'll see the wilting leaves. The blooms won't look very good. Everything will look a little bit stressed. Come back in the evening when the sun has set and it's gotten a little cooler. That's when you want to check your plants and you want to see how they're doing. If they still look wilty at that time, then that's when you want to give them a little bit extra water, take care of them, put up some shade cloth or something like that. But do yourself a favor. Don't go out in the middle of the day. We don't want to be out there. The plants don't want to be out there. Let them do their thing. Let them do their adaptations to heat. That's what they've done. They've developed that. They've evolved to adapt to heat a certain way. And if we respond to that adaptation adaptation, we might be doing them a disservice. So wait until the evening for it to cool down a little bit. Luckily, we do cool down here. Wait for it to cool down and then check them that time and see if there's anything that you can do for them. And then, of course, plant smart. Think about the type of plants that you're planting. Plant the right type of plants together. Don't plant a peony in full sun, even though the plant tag says full sun, right? There's certain things that we can do to make sure that we have a really beautiful garden and that we're not in tears in June and July because we've hit triple digits, because we all know it's going to happen. So planting a heat resilient garden makes a huge difference, makes you look like a better gardener, and it makes you a happier gardener. So that's all I have. If you guys have any questions, please shout it out or let me know in the chat. If not, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks.
Well, I think the chat says it's disabled, so
Oh no.
They're asking questions in the Q&A though.
Oh,
oh,
I have the chat up. I don't
Okay.
know.
where is that?
I have it apparently.
Mm.
So
right.
somebody wanted to know, I think you talked about this. How do you know where the stoma is, top versus bottom by just looking?
Oh, I mean, you would need a microscope to see it. Just look online. Where are the stoma? Most likely the stoma are going to be all over the leaf, right? That's what most of the plants have stomas all over the leaf. The lantana is kind of like a special one that will have it on the underside. There's other ones that have it on the underside as well. But you can kind of look and see. Basically, what I want you to get from this is if you see a plant and it says, oh, it can handle heat, think about why. Why can it handle heat? Why is it a good heat tolerant plant? Do you know what I mean? And are those adaptations appropriate for where we live, where we have the strong sun and the wind and everything like that? So plants will often designate themselves, plant tags, or if you are at a garden center, they'll often designate themselves as heat tolerant plants. But think about why. Patricia.
Yes. Hi, Janie. Thanks.
Hi.
I was just wondering, I only know so far, I've only discovered so far two plants that are so perfectly attuned to our climate that they take no water at all except rainfall.
Yeah.
And the two that I found are freesias and saffron crocus.
Oh, cool.
And
awesome.
I'm curious if other people have discovered plants that basically can be rain fed and still do okay.
Anybody want to? So that's called xeriscaping. That's another name for xeriscaping. And there's where you would want to look for that is like when you are you're at a plant, if you're online at a plant store or something like that, search xeriscape plants, XERISCAPE, xeriscape. And those are plants that can handle just purely handle our rainfall. And I always have a hard time with that, again, because like I said, I like blooms. And so there are certain plants that can handle like California poppies, right? You don't have to irrigate California poppies at all. The Delta sunflower, you don't have to irrigate those at all if you don't want to. But if you do irrigate it a little bit, you might have a prettier plant. You know what I mean? But if anybody wants to chime in and say what their favorite xeriscape plants are, feel free to.
Well, you're right that both freesias and saffron crocus die back after the rains stop in the spring, so you don't have anything there except dry leaves, and it doesn't look the greatest.
But how cool, right? That's that plant's adaptation to instead of dying, it dies back. So it protects its root system and it protects its life, and then it comes back the next year, which is amazing. So yeah, if anybody has any xeriscape plants for Patricia, chime in and let us know.
Well, I think that a lot of the spring bulbs don't really need any water. Maybe they get some incidental water, but daffodils, I don't water my daffodils.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, bulbs are a great adaptation, and a lot of them are Mediterranean. So they're a great adaptation to our climate.
Yeah. Yeah. They say, like, if you look online and they'll say lavender is a good xeriscape plant, they'll say yarrow is a good xeriscape plant, but you got to think about here, you know, us here. Is it a really good, will it survive? Probably. Will it look good? Probably not. You know what I mean? Probably not for us. So I think for us, most xeriscape plants, I mean, even some gardeners that have succulent gardens, even they irrigate their garden. So it's hard. It's hard to find a plant that's purely doesn't need any water and will look good most of the season around here.
Yeah, that's
So-
the-
A really good source is to go over to Patricia Carpenter's strip along the bike path on
Russell.
Russell, just
Yeah.
past, west of Road 97,
Just
and
past Cactus Corner. Yeah.
yeah, it's really a wonderful demonstration.
Yeah, it's really incredible.
yeah, I was gonna
What
say
she
that's
does.
kind of the qualifier is the native plants will survive through the summer. They just won't look good.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really irrigate mine, but they're gonna look kind of beat for
Yeah.
the end of the summer. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you go on the CNPS, did I say that right? California Native Plant Society, garden tours, they have it in May for a reason, or is it March or May? But you know what I mean? Like they have it that time of year for a reason because everything's looking beautiful. But everybody, all those gardeners fully admit come August, it doesn't look anything like that. And that's okay. That's okay. That's that's a type of gardening. So
Mhm. So, Janey, how frequently, how much water are you giving most of your garden, and how much do you give those plants that you said just need a little water?
so I water my garden every morning during the summer. I water it every morning for about 20 minutes, I would say. And what depends is what size emitter do I put on? So all of
Right.
those plants, I'll just put on a half a gallon emitter. Depending on how big the plants are though, because as they develop and as they get a little bit bigger, I'll even if it's a drought tolerant plant, I'll even bump it up maybe to 1 gallon per hour. Like that Catalpa, it grows so fast and it grows so big. I'm still going to give it a gallon per hour. You know what I mean? So what is that? A third of a gallon every morning. And I could decrease it to 3 times a week. And I think that my plants would be fine. Unfortunately, part of my profession is making sure my garden looks really good. So I water every single day for 20 minutes in the morning.
Okay. And for the ones that you said need just a little water, I mean, do you accommodate those in some other way, or just
I just do a half gallon per hour. So they get a
Yeah.
half gallon per hour, 20 minutes every morning.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, they could probably handle less, but just so that I have my whole garden. I don't have separate irrigation schedules for my garden. I do the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Any other
All right.
questions?
Yeah, there's
Um,
another question in the chat.
Okay.
Shauna wanted to know where there were free mulch chips in Davis.
Oh, the dump. No, those aren't free. The dump, you have to pay $5 per ton, which is amazing, right? But you have to have a truck or something like that. But if you go to getchipdrop.com, I shouldn't say this because I don't want you guys to get it. I want to get it. If you go to getchipdrop.com, that is an online match.com for gardeners who want arborist wood chips. And I will tell you though, this year I've gotten maybe like 9 drops. I have an acre and I've gotten 9 drops, like big drops of arborist wood chips. And I haven't gotten any the past couple months. I don't know why. I think I've been talking about it too much. But that's a really good place to get it. Otherwise, you can just call a local arborist and say, hey, here's my address if you happen to be driving by. Of course, if you do that, you want to make sure that they don't have anything like black walnut, or like if you have pets, they don't have oleander or something like that, that's going to mess with something. Same thing if you go to the dump, you can't guarantee what you have. But I personally love arborist wood chips because, like I said, I have a really big property and I feel really strongly that I want a couple inches of wood chips over over everything. And so I can't afford the fancy stuff.
Mhm.
So-
Yeah, it's a great source with the one caveat that you can't really control how much you're going to get.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
you might want to talk to your neighbors in case you end up with 10 yards.
Oh, I've gotten like 40 before, but like I said, I could use it,
You've got a big
Yeah. Yeah, I have a big yard. Yeah,
Big
but
yard.
I've had some people, one person, they lived in a mobile home and they got a chip drop and they had a pile for like a year in their driveway. So just be careful.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Stacy. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Stacy.
Yeah, sorry, I was writing something in the Q&A and then it disappeared.
Mm,
And I
sorry.
can't access the chat. That's okay. I'm just finishing sheet mulching my Bermuda grass lawn.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's growing there, I have cypress trees along one side that's like the border between me and the neighbor.
Mhm.
And then there's a Texas red oak that's been planted pretty much in the middle.
Mhm.
And I'm just so worried about the Bermuda grass coming back.
Mhm.
But when you were talking about, and I'll start planting in the fall.
Mhm.
Well, you were talking about plants that have that grow deep, or that, oh, maybe I'm sure there are some that you showed in your pictures that maybe grow broadly more quickly, like as more cover.
Mhm.
And that just has me thinking, like, what are there certain types of things that I could maybe get started with that would be a good defense against the potential of the Bermuda grass, popping back through? I guess it's kind of dormant in the fall and winter, I suppose, but
Kind of. So when I first moved into my
exactly.
property, when I
Yeah.
first moved in here, we had Bermuda grass everywhere.
Yeah.
And I did the no-till method where you put cardboard down first.
Yep.
So basically you weed whack the Bermuda grass back, you put cardboard down first, you put 6 inches of compost, and then you put another couple inches of our arborist wood chips. And I would say that took care of 75% of the Bermuda grass, but I still had areas where it was popping through and I did have to pull. But after about 2 years, it's gotten significantly less. But I think what you're saying is what do you think you can use to smother the Bermuda grass? And
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do compost. I can come back over with compost maybe in the fall. All I've done is the cardboard and the wood chips, and I'm gonna try and get another chip drop to make it thicker.
yeah.
I figure when I plant, I can plant like dump some compost maybe in the spot, plant. I'm afraid to dig through the cardboard. This is like
Yeah.
my big fear is like, I know the cardboard will break down, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
anyway.
Just don't think of it as a one and done
Yeah,
exercise, right? This is something that you're going to have to stay on top of. You're going to have to keep putting wood chips in. You're going to have to go to your plants and pull the Bermuda grass until the plants develop enough where it can
right.
crowd it out, basically.
Okay.
But the more you put down, the more you plant in there, the less space that Bermuda grass is going to have to come. And because you didn't put any compost down, that means that you're digging right down to actually where the Bermuda grass roots are. So you might have a little bit extra trouble, but just stay on top of it and you'll get it eventually. Do you know what I mean? Like you'll definitely get it eventually, but the more plants you can plant to cover up that area, basically the better off you're going to be.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
Janey,
You'll get it.
Yeah.
Janey, I have a question about compost.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different sources of compost in this area, and I noticed your plants really seem to be really, really healthy. And I've had some pretty bad experiences with various vendors, and I was just wondering, who are you getting your compost from?
So I've gotten it from a couple people. I've gotten the Yolo County dump compost because one, I'm not using that for growing vegetables, but if you look at the Yolo County their processes, I don't remember what it's called right now, but it's something certified. Basically, they heat their compost up enough to kill the bad stuff. I don't know. I'm not saying that right, but they basically do a really good job with their compost. And if you get the compost during a free time, then that's a really great thing. Another place that I like is Dixon Landscape. I really like their compost. I think they have great compost, and it's not too expensive, but it's definitely not cheap. And those are probably the two main ones that I go to get compost. I've used a couple other places that I'm not huge fans of as well. But I have to be honest, I like the Yolo County landfill compost the most.
Mhm.
Can I am using it for my vegetables. Should I not
Uh-huh.
be doing that?
No, I think it's fine. I don't think you should worry about it. I mean,
It's been
like,
great for me. I mean,
I know.
I got the best garden on the block, you know?
Yeah, I have no like I would be right there with you. The only reason why I'm not growing it is because I don't grow that many vegetables.
Yeah, okay.
But you know, like I guess they can't guarantee that it's organic. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to be a certified organic gardener, I don't know if you could use that type of compost just because they can't control what us as community
Yeah.
members put into our green waste piles. But I know that the certification process and the process that they use to take care of their mulch is amazing, and their primary customer for their compost are farmers all around here. So the
Mhm.
foods that we're eating and we're buying from the grocery stores that have been grown around here are grown with the Yolo County compost. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it personally.
Great.
Anything else? Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Janey. That was great. So next session, which is July 10th, Patricia Lazicki, excuse me, who's an extension specialist, is going to talk about becoming a better tomato detective.
Ooh.
So how to diagnose the problems the tomato plant may be having and how to solve them. And she definitely knows tomatoes. So if you have a tomato plant, definitely one to catch. And then the session after that, July 24th, Janey's going to be back and talking about common garden problems and their solutions.
I didn't know that. I didn't know I was going to be back.
Yes, you are.
Mike, you have two lovely ladies here, Shelly and Christy. They are school gardeners up in El Dorado, and they should do a presentation, right, Shelly and Christy? I'm calling you guys out. All right, I'll talk to them.
Okay,
I'm
give them
totally
all, give them
embarrassing
my
them.
email address, and yes,
Okay,
I'd love to
they
talk
should
to
do a
them,
presentation.
but,
They're fantastic.
and I'll talk to you, but I did have you on the calendar for the
No, that's fine. I
24th.
just haven't looked that
Yeah,
far in advance
okay.
yet.
Okay,
I'll get working on it right now.
all right.
All right.
All
Thank
right,
you,
well, thanks for
everybody.
coming, everybody.
you.
Happy
Thanks, Judy.
gardening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye. Stay cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, yeah,
Thanks,
stay cool.
Janey.
Where is let me get out of here. Leave, there we go.